I'm going to talk a little bit about single-use plastics and then tell you a little bit about Xampla itself, and then also talk around the area that Laura was talking around in some detail, was around what is our role as tech leaders in this area of sustainability and ethical businesses and so forth. Xampla has a mission-led business. And our mission is to reduce marine plastic pollution. That's what we're set up to do. And as a goal, our ambition is to be the world leader in the replacements for plastics. So I'm sure all of us here are incredibly good consumers, and we do our best to recycle where we can, and we probably buy ethically where we can. So I just want to take a moment and think about the last 24 hours in your life as a consumer. Where have been the touch points on the plastic? How much plastic have you come into contact with in the past 24 hours? And it will mainly be food sort of stuff. It may be the fact, as Victoria was just mentioning, we are fast flow testing our entire team twice a week. There's a lot of PPE type plastic involved in that process. Where are your touch points as a consumer? And then once you've passed on from that, you can think also there are a whole bunch of plastics you haven't seen in your life. And this is actually in many ways more alarming. So inside your shampoos, there are plastics. Inside my shirt right now, there are microcapsules with fragrance inside that are made from melamine formaldehyde. And they're put into our clothes as we wash our clothes. They release fragrance during the day to make the clothes smell fresh. And when we wash our clothes again in the machine, those melamine formaldehyde plastics get washed out straight into the watercourse, and they can't be reclaimed. So plastics is not just the plastic bottles that you see, which you probably already have replaced. There's a huge number of plastics which we don't actually see. And that's where Xampla is focusing, because that's where marine plastic pollution comes in. Now, the cost of plastic has never been priced in. The reason that we use plastic so profligately at the moment is because for the past 70 years of the life of plastic, which is really all it is, nobody's actually captured the cost of it. It's a cheap feedstock and it's processed cheaply, so the price is cheap, so we use it too much. And these beach scenes are very familiar to us, but there's also plastic all over the place. So there's plastic, when they look in the Arctic and they drill an ice core, there's a clear line of microplastics representing the past 70 years. At the moment, there's been a number of studies about microplastics actually entering into the food chain, but actually even entering into the placentas of us as humans. Now, there's a lot of argument there, and we're a science-led business, about how harmful that actually is in terms of toxicity and so forth. But the reality is, I think most of us would agree that there is quite a problem if we are finding plastic in human placentas. It's everywhere. And another point I'd make is that this is increasing. We may feel in the West that because we're doing a good job with our recycling and so forth, that we're bringing down our plastic use, but there is a massive increase projected over the next 20 to 30 years in plastic use, unless some radical changes are made as developing nations come on and start using plastics in the way that we use plastics. And I'll just give you another example. Unilever puts out 50 billion single-use sachets containing personal care products. That's a format that's very popular in developing nations in particular. 50 billion. There is no way of recycling those plastics. They are simply ending up on Indonesian beaches. Now, many of the arguments that you'll hear from majors about how they are addressing plastic comes down to recycling. And of course, recycling does have a part in this. But actually, if you look at this chart from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who are the leaders really in this field, the proportion of plastic that gets recycled is tiny. So it's a distraction argument. That isn't really a solution. It's part of a solution for today, but that's not actually a solution. We're still landfilling, and it says, as it says there on that chart, about a third of the plastic that is being produced at the moment leaks into the environment, and that is simply unacceptable. The good news, apart from the fact that 70 years in the lifetime of a planet is a pretty short period, we may have done a huge amount of harm to ourselves, but there is opportunity now to solve that. And we're already seeing not just consumers changing, but governments responding to consumers. So there are bans and regulatory changes all around the world, which means we are actually addressing this problem. But it does raise the question of what does the world look like after plastic? we are going to live in a world where there is going to be some plastic remaining in terms of traditional plastic, but all of our materials will change by 2040, and that's where Xampla is aiming as a company. What does it look like? What does the world look like at that period? We're going to be growing materials in a huge way, which raises ethical questions about land use and fairness and access to land and water and so forth. And there's going to be big changes around the way that consumers and so forth behave at that period. So a post-oil plastic looks like this. It has to be sustainably sourced. So that means if it's coming from plant, which typically it will come from plants, it needs to be sustainably sourced. There are some syn-bio solutions at the moment as well. It needs to do what plastics do. Plastics are really useful things. They keep our food safe. They keep us safe. So you actually need to develop materials that deliver that performance. And this is where Xampla has an opportunity. Our class of materials is completely new. We are making plastics from plant proteins. Most of the materials you see at the moment are made from plant polysaccharides, so that's a different class of materials. Plant proteins are uniquely strong. And the other thing is at end of life. We need a perfect end of life. So to us, the only solution to plastic pollution is to develop a plastic that doesn't pollute. If we're seeing a third of all plastics going into the environment, that is the only long-term sustainable solution. And Xampla's plastics are actually a food. We make those ones you can see on the screen there, are made from peas, so you can actually eat them. And the other part, which is obviously very important as startup businesses, as we're all familiar with, you never actually make an impact unless you get to scale. And in 20 years' time, a company the size of Unilever will not be buying 1 ton of material from a small Cambridge startup. They'll want from 100 Cambridge startups. They'll want to buy 100 ton of material from one large supplier. So we need scale, and that's where, again, Xampla has an advantage. So just another area that is interesting around this is format change. And this is something, again, you will be seeing. This is already happening. Xampla is just sort of fitting into an existing trend here. Most of our customers we're talking to say that they don't want to be shipping bottles of water around the world anymore. That's one of the major problems they have. So your shampoo, within a couple of years, will probably not come in a plastic bottle you buy at the supermarket. It will come in the form of a sachet, which gets dropped into a bottle and made up. And this is a little film, if we can get our technology working here, of a product that we've developed, which is just a soluble, edible sachet, which is only made from peas. You shake it up, and there's your shampoo, or in that case, that's a soft drink. What I have here is a product we're developing, which is a cookable stock cube. So you simply take that, it's made of peas again, you throw it into a pot, you cook it, and you eat it. Now, when you start thinking about format change, you start thinking about plastics in a very different way. What is a plastic if it's a wrapper that you can eat? We start thinking very differently about the nature of these things. So that's who Xampla is. We have a next generation material. Our chair is the former Chief Sustainability Officer of Unilever. So for somebody like Jeff to come from pretty much the biggest job in corporate sustainability to join a small Cambridge startup is pretty exciting. We're backed by deep tech investors, Amadeus, who many of you I'm sure are familiar with. Also Horizons Ventures. So Horizons were early investors in Zoom, Spotify, and Facebook. So they are seeing us as a major disruptive force, and they're seeking to develop in the next few years at that sort of scale. We also have an impact investor in Sky Ocean Ventures, and their mission completely aligns with us. Their mission is to address marine plastic pollution. We're also a University of Cambridge spin-out, and that's our deep tech roots. And this is, again, if anyone in the audience is from a university spin-out, I'm sure you're aware, if you have a deep tech solution, it will remain a deep tech solution until you find how it impacts on the world in a positive way. So all of this conversation about sustainability and impact and so forth is actually related to the business model itself. So we have identified a very good opportunity for research coming out of the science base at exactly the right time to make an impact on the world. And other university spin-outs, I'm sure you think in exactly the same terms. The best science in the world will remain only a science project unless you align it with regulatory drivers, consumer drivers, sustainability, ethical drivers, and the real world as it exists. So I just wanted to talk a little bit around B Corps and sort of ethical leadership. So Xampla is actually the UK's first university spin-out to become a certified B Corp. So B corporations are a growing movement where built into the DNA of the company is a balance between profit and purpose. So we have, hard-nosed corporate VCs as our shareholders, but at the same time, built in for the purpose of the board and the articles of the company, is a consideration of the impact of our actions on people, on planet, and on a wider operating environment. And that's part of a metric, as Laura was saying, to get change, you need metrics. That's part of a process in helping us think about how we develop a business and how we impact on the wider world. And what I'd say is, for a company like Xampla, obviously this is completely our mission. We are focused on making an environmental impact. But I think the same principles apply for all tech businesses. And I think that all of us can take a look at our own businesses and think, well, where do we impact on the world? And are we doing the right thing by that world, whether it's sustainability or whether it's to do with our workforce and our people, or whether it's our supply chain? How we interact with these parts of our organization are choices that we make. And if we put our ethical leadership into this, we can make the right choices. And my point really is that every single disruptive tech business seeks to change the world. And if you change the world, you might change it for the worse as well as the better, unless you really think and measure and track what those impacts will be. Now, I would say that this is the right thing to do, but we're not here as cuddly liberals. We are also here growing businesses. And I'd say it's actually the best thing for the business too. And the main reason is because of recruitment. All of us, every time I've ever pitched to investors, they keep telling me they invest in the team, not the product or whatever. And they're absolutely right. There is a competition for talent. At the best people have choices about where they go. And if we can offer as companies an ethical choice, a mission-led company, a business which actually brings some good in the world, young people in particular do not hang up their ethics with their coat as they walk in the morning. They actually want to wake up each day and work for a better world. And I think that in 5 years' time, all of this will be perfectly standard. Nobody will be pitching a business in 5 years' time saying, I actively want to harm the planet. So what we're seeing is a very rapid transition. At top of the list of benefits for why we should be running our tech businesses with an ethical consideration is that recruitment point. But the second one is investors. The ESG investment sort of range is growing very, very quickly. But again, in 5 years' time, there won't be an ESG category. Everybody will be investing ethically. Nobody wants to put money or to be seen to be putting money into harmful businesses. So it is strongly in our interests as startups to align with the aims and goals of our investors, because increasingly their investors in those funds have got ESG message and metrics. And I point you at BlackRock's quite extraordinary leadership in this space and quick turnaround to put ethics at the center. It's a good business to do it. And the final one is a freedom to operate point, is that if we don't get ahead of ethical concerns, if we're not ahead of our consumers and our regulators, then those regulators will turn around and bite us. So it is strongly in all our interest to lead our business from an ethical point of view. So I've got 10 seconds left, so I will just leave you with one thought, is just take a look at your own businesses. Ours is very easy. We're aiming at addressing plastic pollution. But take a look at your own business and just think, where are you making that impact? And is that impact the right impact? Thank you.